Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Tona V. We're gonna be diving into our story of Atlantis. Now, this was written down for the Hermetic Brotherhood, and this is by W.P. Falom. It's an MD. Pretty cool down here. They got this little swastika cross, and the Ouroboros. This was wrote in 1903. So right here on page 4 it says, the sacred writings of all nations concur in the same declaration and statement of disaster to some portion of the earth, most generally including all. In a late issue of Mind, speaking about an article at this point, appears an article headed A Monument to Atlantis, which says, quote, a notable discovery of more than ordinary interest for historians, especially those who have a leaning toward antiquities, has lately been made by the well-known archaeologist Augustus Le Plongeon. This discovery should particularly attract the attention of Americans, since it enables them to lay claim to one of the most important monuments of ancient times. The edifice in question is the Pyramid of Chicolo, standing 5,396 feet above level of the sea and situated to the southwest or southwest of Cuernavaca, 60 miles from the city of Mexico. For more than a century, the pyramid has been occasionally visited by distinguished travelers, including the learned Humboldt, but none succeeded in discovering the purpose for which the monument had been erected, nor in deciphering the mysterious inscriptions on its side. As far back as 1886, Dr. Le Plongeon published his alphabetic key to the Mayan hieroglyphs, comparing this with the ancient hieratic alphabet. He has now found that the signs on the pyramid of Xochicalo, are both Mayan and Egyptian, and a careful study of these decorative inscriptions has made it plain to him that the pyramid was a monumental structure erected to commemorate the submergence and destruction of the great land of Mu, which was Plato's Atlantis, together with its population of 64 million human beings about 11,500 years ago. Down on page 6 it says, these records on stone, on sun-dried bricks, on papyrus all tell the same story. The little we know of the Aztecs is also confirmatory of the same fact, whence came the people of South America, with their advanced civilization and traditions of the past. What mighty people built the great cities and temples of now forest-covered cities of Yucatan and Central America, with their carved glyphs and correspondences to the hieroglyphs of the Valley of the Nile and the East Indian entablatures, and moreover, on almost precisely similar styles of architecture to those of Egypt and India. It is reasonable to suppose that there was no common bond of fellowship between all these. The ancient Egyptian ideas have dominated the world down to the present day. Instead of a mummy case, we use a coffin for our dead. The idea is the same. The departed ghost was to be saved the trouble of making a new body, perhaps a short notice, at the great day of the resurrection. Now, this is interesting too, because it says the Trinity in unity of God, now universally received, was an Egyptian idea, and the same is wrought into the stone tablets which Le Plongeon and his amiable wife have unearthed in the forests of the Mayas and Quiches. Down here on page 10 it says, Ignatius Donnelly finds a supporter of his Atlantis theory in Sir Daniel Wilson, president of the University of Toronto, who declares after a great deal of search that the lost Atlantis was not a myth, but that it was really a part of the continent of America. He accounts for this disappearance from view in a different way, but that is merely incidental. Donnelly's theory was that the land was submerged by some great volcanic upheaval, and that from those who escaped to the continents of Europe and Asia came the tradition of the deluge. See what I've been saying? They left America and went everywhere else to start again. Why is that, y'all? Why is that? Why do you think people had to be living underground with such a huge volcanic explosion? What is Yellowstone? It's the biggest volcano in the world. It's a supervolcano. Why do you think we had so much soil accumulation, everything, the mud flood and all that? Look, right in front of you, y'all. Sir Daniel rejects this explanation as being disproved by the fact that there are no traces of such volcanic action either on the continent or in the ocean bed. He believes that the ancient Egyptians, the most progressive and adventurous people of ancient times, discovered the continent, but that in the decline both of their learning and power became lost to view and existed as time as our knowledge of Egypt begins merely as a shadowy tradition. It is his opinion that traces of the Egyptians of those days are to be sought in the ruined cities of Central America, whose origin has never been determined, nor even been made the basis of any reasonable theory. Plato's account says, Atlantis was a continent larger than Asia and Africa put together, and that at its western extremity were islands which afforded easy passage to a large continent lying still beyond. This last mentioned continent being now supposed to be South America. On page 15 he says, during the frequent visits I have made to Mexico, said the mining engineer of Philadelphia to an Inquirer reporter, I have come in contact with many of the Indians residing there and have heard some very singular stories. One which all the Indians unite in telling is that far in the interior exists an enormous city, never yet visited by white men. It is described as peopled by a race similar to the ancient Aztecs, who are sun worshippers and offer human sacrifices to their deity. The race is said to be in a high state of civilization, and the Indians say that the city is full of huge structures which are miracles of quaint but beautiful architecture, and are situated on broad paved streets, far surpassing those of the city of Mexico. One Indian I recollect assured me that he had seen the city and its inhabitants with his own eyes, but had been afraid of being captured and had fled. Of course I did not believe him, but all the same, it is not a little strange that the accounts of the Mexican Indians relative to the mysterious and magnificent interior city agree perfectly. Down here on page 19 he says, we add still another account of wonderful discovery and proof of the immense population of the old Atlantean kingdom in its prime. This time it is from the city of Mexico, the center of the modern Atlantean or Aztec civilization. Modern Atlantean or Aztec civilization. City of Mexico. Modern Atlantean. Quote, what appears to be the verification of an old Aztec fable of a buried race of cave dwellers and a hidden city in southwestern Mexico is a matter in which the local scientists are interested at present. L.P. Leroy, a French engineer who has lived long in this republic, has just arrived from the wilds of the southwest and reported that he has discovered in the state of Guerrero a huge natural cave, which he believes to be the greatest in Mexico, if not the world. He says that it is much larger than the famous cavern of Cacahuamilpa, situated at some distance south of Cuernavaca, which has hitherto been supposed to be the largest natural cave in existence in Mexico. Mr. Le Royal, after penetrating a considerable distance into the cave, determined to make a thorough investigation of it, and accordingly, a few days ago, furnished himself with food sufficient for a day, provided himself with lanterns, etc., and set out upon his task all alone. As he went along, he made a thorough plan of the cave, but did not anticipate that his task would be so arduous as it proved. At the first, the bottom of the cave was a gradual slope downward, then changed upward and afterward alternated for the most part between descents and ascents. Here and there, however, a level bottom of great width was met. The height of the cave varied, as might naturally be expected. In some places it was several hundred feet high. For some distance, from the entrance, no trace of human beings was found. Occasionally, magnificent stalactites and stalagmites, the finest Mr. Le Royal had ever seen, were met with. After proceeding for some hours, he came upon what had evidently been an ancient cemetery, as there were at least 400 petrified bodies, together with ancient idols, etc. There was also a fountain of beautiful clear spring water, which was found to be excellent. Some of the tools, as well as 2 or 3 skulls, Mr. Le Royal brought away with him, and they are now in this city. The appearance of this charnel house, thus lighted up for the first time for hundreds of years, was gruesome in the extreme and well calculated to shake the nerves of the explorer. Mr. Le Royal continued his explorations while hour after hour passed. It was not until after he had traveled a distance of at least 21 1/2 leagues that he thought it time to call a halt and proceed on his return journey. So far as he could see, the distance still to be traversed might be very considerable, with the chances for the cave opening out, as the floor seemed to be well trodden by human feet. He retraced his steps as speedily as possible, and after being underground for upward of 24 hours, found himself once more at the entrance of the cave. Mr. Lee Royale promised to make further explorations before long. It is expected that a partly fully equipped for the exploration of this wonderful cavern of the dead will soon be fitted out under the guidance of the discoverer, and the outcome of the investigations will be awaited with interest. The population in general in Mexico believe that at some place near the southwestern coast of Mexico there exists a great white city with countless treasure which has never been seen by white men, and the approach to which is so intricate and cleverly concealed that a stranger has never entered its solitary precincts. With all the increasing mass of information on the subject, it seems there should be some effort at collection under guidance of what is known about Atlantis the Mighty. And of course, there is. Good old Smithsonian taking it all away. Here on page 25 in chapter 2, he says, "From two distinct sources we give an account of an old Mexican city that has never been entered by the foot of a white man and which was known to be in existence long before the Spanish conquest." Quote, Mr. Juan Alvarez, who has just returned from an expedition in the southwestern part of the Republic, reports that he has found a city which has never been entered by a white man, and which has evidently been in existence for hundreds of years, going back before the time of the conquest of the country by the Spaniards. It is an old Aztec city, and the approaches to it are so guarded by nature that it is an impossibility to reach it if the inhabitants do not want a traveler to get in. The city lies in an almost inaccessible mountains in the eastern extreme part of the country, and is so far away from civilization that few white men have ever been in the neighborhood. It was the purest accident that Alvarez became aware of the city was anywhere in the vicinity, and after he found it, all of his endeavors to reach it were unavailing on account of the persistent opposition of the natives. He had been traveling over the mountains in search of an outlet to the Pacific Ocean when he came to the top of an elevated plateau and crossed to the further edge. He had a magnificent view, and while looking over the country, saw what he took to be houses in a fair distant valley. A close inspection with a glass convinced him that what he saw was really a collection of houses, and he at once set about reaching the place to see who lived in that part of the country. After days of hard work climbing over cliffs and mountains, he reached a point from which he obtained a good view of the city and saw that it was regularly laid out in streets and was peopled with a race who knew something about civilization. The houses were of stone and were surrounded by yards in which were growing flowers and shrubs. On all sides were evidences of taste shown by the inhabitants, and it was evident that he had found a city which was not known to the outside world. A careful examination of the country showed him that the city was located with a natural amphitheater and was accessible by one side only. He saw that the only means of access was through a long and narrow defile which led into the mountains from the Pacific coast side, and he started to reach the place where he could find this entrance. He made an outline drawing of the city as it appeared to him from a distant mountain top, and this is all he has to show that there is a city within the heart of the mountains, for he was never allowed to reach the spot. From this drawing it is plain that the city has not less than 4,000 inhabitants. The houses are all of stone and are supplied with doors and windows. In the center was a large building, which was undoubtedly the temple of worship, for on its walls could be seen sculptured designs representing the deity. It was in the shape of the ancient teocalli, which are to be found in the many parts of this country, and the people could be seen passing in and out of it during all hours of the day. After 10 days' arduous work, Alvarez found himself at the foot of the mountains on the western slope and set about searching for the canyon leading to the city. He had so well marked the lay of the land that he had no difficulty in finding the entrance, but he was met by a band of Indians who refused to let him proceed. They offered him no violence, but insisted that he should return. He told them that he had come over the mountain and did not know how to find his way back. After a consultation, he was told he would have to remain a while as a prisoner, and 2 runners were sent into the mountains who returned in a day with orders from someone in authority. And Alvarez was blindfolded and placed on the back of a mule. He traveled in this condition for 3 days, only having the bandage removed from his eyes at night. On the 4th day, he was told to remove his bandage, and when he did so, he found himself on the borders of the Pacific Ocean. the Indians had gone, leaving him with nothing to guide him back to the place where he had seen the city. This city is described in full in Future Rulers of America and has been visited by peoples in the body who have been permitted to do so. And when he means in the body, he means within this Hermetic Brotherhood, okay? Here on page 30 it says, the American archaeologists who went to the recently discovered city in the Sierra Madre Mountains have returned to tell of another hidden city 5 Spanish leagues north of the first city. The leader of the party, C.W. Pantheon of Philadelphia, says that these cities were evidently twin capitals of a wealthy district long before the Aztecs appeared. Long before the Aztecs disappeared or appeared. The two cities are connected by an underground passages hewn out of solid rock, and it was while exploring one of these passages that the second was discovered. The two cities are connected by underground passages hewn out of solid rock, and it was while exploring one of these passages that the second was discovered. It lies in a deep basin of the mountains with no exit except the underground tunnel. At least none has been found. To that which we have thus drawn from all accessible sources in the visible, I now desire to add supplementary testimony from the astral records, which I believe to be reliable and worthy of credence. So they're going into the Akashic. Does not this collated evidence of the similarity in nature and civilization west of the great city, which could not possibly have had commerce with the mother country for centuries, prove conclusively, even to the realistic and scientific mind, a common origin for religious teachings, customs, languages, both oral and written? All the discoveries relative to this subject confirm this conclusion. We are indebted to those who are impelled by an irresistible desire to learn and know, who, in this cause, are willing to expatriate themselves, endure danger, and overcome obstructing difficulties, if they may, by some chance guidance, bring again to the light of day some of the various records which were left when the sun of the manifested spiritual world went down into the shuddering earth. Here on page 32 he says, it matters little how science and religion shall accept that which is offered, whether in a scientific way or from the unseen as true and of value. Science and religion have never received anything new upon untried lines of thought until they have been forced to the exception. That is why the priests of all ages are so conservative and have withheld so much more than they should, even on their conservative line of thought. It has ever been their rule to hold fast upon that of which they had become possessed, content and satisfied without the trouble and exertion of seeking new fields for themselves, or admitting the possibility of broadening truth for others. All that has ever been learned to distinguish the savage from civilization was known to the wise men of Atlantis. Whenever there has been upon the earth a sufficient number of Atlanteans at one time to control a nation or to form one by themselves, that nation or epoch has always experienced a most wonderful growth. In the days of the last Egyptian splendor, when it was the school to which the Greeks and Romans resorted for instruction, was the last time noted in history of such a reappearance in sufficient numbers to admit a national control. What they did, we have the pyramids, the Temple of Karnak, and all of the mighty ruins of the Nile and Euphrates in evidence. Now here on page 33 I find this interesting. It is on page 33, which is always that number that likes to give that drop. As soon as the Anglo-Saxon speaking races were sufficiently developed out of savagery. So that statement's big, but then also what's pretty big is Anglo-Saxon and the aspect that we learned that is the sons of Isaac. Kurameo, if you want to search up Anglo-Saxon, sons of Isaac, and really see what's going on there, the research is deep, and Kurameo has done it. The Atlanteans commenced reappearing, startling the whole world ever and anon with their great strides towards wisdom and knowledge, as they slowly paved the way by conquest and discovery for the settlement and reoccupation of that which belonged to them, and for the utilization of all their old resources under new conditions of added strength and experience. In no other way can we account for the wilting and extermination of the red-skinned usurpers who had neither claim nor strength to maintain title to that into which they had strayed by accident during the temporary absence of the real owners. Much sympathy has been wasted on the red son of the forest. He has but obeyed the law. who cannot dominate the resources of the environment must yield title to him who can. How much would our vast storehouse of mineral and agricultural wealth have helped man's unfoldment if they had never been used? The difference between the American Indian and the Anglo-Saxon Atlantean is plain to the dullest intellect. As the city of Atlantis grew, her population was drawn off into colonies, which had deep and abiding influence on the whole of the western continent, but especially centering along the belt in which Atlantis itself was located. Between the fading away of the last Egyptian civilization and the concealment of the world's records at that time, there was a mysterious gap, which can be accounted for only in one way. When Atlantis was in its prime, there were other units in the world's category of nations which were not so far advanced. If Atlantis had held on, even in the inner tenor of her way, all nations of the world would have received the light and been uplifted to something near its own standpoint. But when this chance of development was cut off, they groped in comparative darkness. When this class of people incarnated again in force of numbers, such scenes as the conquest of Rome by the Goths and Vandals, the overrunning of Europe by the Huns, and the eruption of Tartars, times without number occurred. As they disappeared from the mortal vision, we can but recognize their sameness of purpose, and the most pertinent fact that undone duty made all this trouble for the Atlanteans of the far past, their comrades and associates. Have we learned the lesson that no human being is separate from ourselves? A wrong, once done, must be righted. It is an eternal law of exact justice. Here on page 37 he says, "The freedom of the thought body and the aptitude of the minds engendered thereby has once more drawn to the American continent more Atlanteans than were ever incarnated at one time since the fall of that city. It thus happens that their inventions and knowledge and wisdom and the results of thought force modified and perfected by the assimilation of hundreds of years in volcanic rest is coming upon the nation in a flood, as with outstretched hands they demand from the silence that which they themselves deposited in the astral records long ages since." On page 38, the bottom. The reason why this age is so celebrated above others of the near past is due to the facts thus stated. We perceive in the near future, as has been repeatedly foretold, the end of a cycle is at hand. Cataclysmic results, the sinking of land in some places and the rising in others, is imminent. So I just wanted to touch base on all this with y'all. I find it very interesting, and there's also another interesting part of this book that gives a story and an account, as well as a inscription, let's say, from an Atlantean and the translation of that scribe. So I hope y'all be prepared for the next one in this regard, because we got a translation I don't think anybody really knows about. So y'all get ready. Here we go, baby.